Welcome. Welcome to the Legacy of the Excellence of Xi Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. You know, walking around today looking at the exhibits, our history is long for Xi Lambda. And what happens is that also our history has continued. If you look at a lot of things and go down the big line, you'll see that we've had a number of brothers who have been accomplished in military, religion, and particularly education. So to start off our centennial year, we decided we would have people come out and express how they felt about Xi Lambda during the era that they spend a lot of their time. And fortunately, we do have two Xi Lambda former presidents, and then two alumni brothers who specified the idea of being an alumni. If your chapter is celebrating 100 years, and you also been in the fraternity 60 plus years, that says something. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We want to ask people, we feel free to ask questions, and the speaker will know when their time is up, and so we can move on. So our first person this evening is going to be the youngest of the speakers, who one of the histories you need to know is that at one time in Xi Lambda chapter in Chicago, you probably had to be at least 50 years old to be the president. You just come walking up in here because you got a degree, and now you're going to be the president of Xi Lambda. So the youngest brother that we can know of that became the president of Xi Lambda is Brother Ardell Ricks. Please give him a hand. Come on.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Farad Ali. I'm the 34th chapter president of Xi Lambda, 2011 initiative of Xi Lambda. I just want to welcome you. As you heard Brother Lane say, this is the first of 7 Centennial events. So I encourage you to support us. This is a reflection on the history of what we've done in the city for 100 years. We say in Xi Lambda, developing leaders since 1924. So you think back to all the things that have happened in Chicago, you think about the history, somewhere there was Xi Lambda influence. So again, I look forward to learning tonight from this illustrious group of brothers. Thank you.
And good evening to everyone, and thank you for joining us as we begin this year of celebrating Xi Lambda Chapter Centennial by starting with its roots. I am Brother Adrian Bates Smith. I'm a 2019 Xi Lambda Chapter initiate. I'm the co-chair of this event, and I'll also be the moderator for this evening. But you won't hear too much from me. I'll let these brothers do most of the speaking. Tonight, I will present questions to our speakers that move us from the charter in 1924 to the present day. And before we conclude, our audience will have the opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. So with that, Apple gave us a little bit of an introduction, but I'd like to introduce all of our panelists here tonight. So first we have Brother Holloway, Brother Larry Holloway. Brother Larry Holloway is a 1960 Theta Chapter initiate. And Brother Holloway has also been, in one way or another, as an officer or a director, involved in the Xi Lambda Chapter Educational Foundation continuously since 1998. Next, we have Brother Richard Lawson. Brother Lawson is a 1961 Theta Chapter initiate. And Brother Lawson was the Xi Lambda Chapter historian from 2012 until 2023. And he's currently the Xi Lambda Chapter historian emeritus. As Brother Apple introduced, next we have Brother Ardell Ricks Jr. Brother Ricks is a 1977 New Road chapter initiate, and he is also a past president of Xi Lambda chapter from 1998 to 2002. And among many, many other things, Brother Ricks is currently the Midwestern Regional Director of Conventions Emeritus. And last but certainly not least, we have Brother Joel Johnson. And Brother Johnson is a 1990 Beta Nu chapter initiate. Again, among many, many other things, Brother Johnson is currently the executive advisor to the general president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So I want to say thank you again to these brothers for agreeing to participate tonight. And, oh, sorry, yes, he is also past general president of Xi Lambda chapter from 2008. Man, I have it written down. I apologize. He is a past president of Xi Lambda chapter from 2008 until 2012. I apologize. So I want to say thank you, brothers, for agreeing to speak tonight and share your unique perspectives on the history of Xi Lambda chapter. And so with that, I'll take a seat and we'll begin our questions. We'll start at the beginning.
Okay.
So, Brother Lawson, can you explain to us a little bit about the charter of Xi Lambda chapter and what was the cultural context at the time, why was the chapter needed, and who was involved in that charter?
What actually started with the charter was an event that took place in 1922. There was a schism in Theta chapter, and the schism had to do with Northwestern University. So that was the beginning of Alpha Mu. Everybody that was at Northwestern in the graduate school lived in the city of Chicago. And that was the medical school, the dental school, the school of pharmacy, and the law school. But then the undergraduates up there wanted a chapter, and they decided to have one, but it affected the brothers living in the house. So they called it, there was a big disagreement as to whether they should start another chapter, since practically everybody in the house was from Northwestern. The outcome of that and the overflow set the stage for 1924. And a lot of the brothers thought that was very divisive, what happened between Theta and Alpha Mu. So that was the beginnings of the chapter. One of the brothers that was very, very instrumental in moving that forward was Lewis Middleton. And Lewis Richard Middleton was the first president of the chapter. But he was very, very instrumental in getting things going. And he had the support of William Dawson. If you go through Dawson's letters, you see his correspondence with him on the subject of the new chapter. And so he got his sustenance from that.
Who was William Dawson?
William L. Dawson, Congressman William L. Dawson, who was from the 1st Congressional District here in the state of Illinois. A charter member of Xi Lambda and past president of Theta.
Can you also tell us a little bit about the cultural context within Chicago and why the alumni chapter was necessary in the city?
Well, the alumni chapter movement had already begun within the fraternity. And I think what happened was that you have to keep in mind that when Theta was started, everybody in that chapter was a graduate brother. So they really saw themselves as not necessarily needing a grad chapter. But like I said, from that incident in 1922, was kind of pushed them over to that. And they decided to bring brothers back. And it worked. It was a very positive thing. You have to keep in mind when they got started, It was a very stellar group of people. He had a jewel. He had the second general president, Roscoe Giles. He had Frank Plummer, who was in the First Initiative group. You had people like Anthony Overton, the wealthiest black man in the world, really. So it was a very powerful chapter, opening up.
Brother Riggs, would you care to add some more about the Charter of Xi Lambda?
The Charter of Xi Lambda is exciting because of the who's. And the who's, I mean, when you talk about someone like William Dawson, he's considered at one point, if you were to read some of the stuff that's out in front, they called him, he was the brightest man in Congress. You can imagine a brother amongst us that is thought of as being the brightest man in the United States Congress. But in addition to that, he's also often called the father of patronage. So you hear about a patronage system that's in Chicago. Richard J. Daley credits William Dawson with teaching him how to start it. So the roots of politics in Chicago and how Chicago politics work often come from things that are here in this room.
Congressman Dawson is also credited with being very instrumental in moving African Americans from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party.
I'd like to comment on Dawson.
So we think about the pivotal moment in American history where African Americans became Democrats. Congressman Dawson with the Policy Kings, if you know the story of the Policy Kings, were the instrumental levers in helping to push the African American community nationally. And so that group of men that chartered this chapter in 1924, also amongst them was Adelbert Stewart, who in 1924 became the first African-American state senator in Illinois and has a statue outside of the governor's office in the Capitol to this day. So it was a number of who's in the African-American community, some of them special to Alpha only, some of them special to all of us in terms of our history and lineage here in the city.
I think one of the joys of fraternity, as in esprit de fraternité, is the connection, the brotherhood, but that it's not just working with people, cooperating with people, but that connection with your brothers. That's what makes the difference, and that's one of the true joys.
I just wanted to comment. I had a personal experience with Brother Dawson. I was just made into the fraternity. I was working at the post office as a long hour sub, and I wanted to be a short hour. And so I said, hey, I'm going to go to Brother Dawson and get this arranged. So I went to his office, and I was sitting there, and he listened to my story. And then he asked me a simple question. He says, can you tell me the difference between a pile of bricks and a skyscraper? And I thought for a minute, it was a trick question that I didn't know. So he says, the answer to that is organization. And he says, I'm going to help you. He said, but you jumped over my precinct captain. You went past my ward commitment, all of this. You see, you go back and get the letter and follow the program. He was a wise man.
Thank you, brothers. I think that this groundwork lays the basis for the rest of our conversation. So this next question is for all of you. I'd like you each to tell me something about Xi Lambda's impact, whether it be civic or fraternal or otherwise, that can't be found in a book or in the newspaper. Let's start with Brother Holloway.
I think back to the years when our national organization was on the first floor of the Alpha House, 4432 South Parkway. Xi Lambda and Theta were on the second and third floor, but the national organization or general organization was on the first. And for a college student to go into the general office to take care of some fraternity business, and you'd see Lawrence T. Young, Brother Lawrence Young, and almost inevitably when you walked in, he was in the midst of something, on the phone or going through some papers, some files, and you'd stand there and wait patiently at the counter. And then he'd look up and say, okay, Brother Holloway, what is it that you're up to now? And then he would generally go into a discussion of what it was he had just been working on. And again, I think you'll hear from me over and over the connection to be able to listen to our General Secretary tell you what he's been working on for the fraternity, to be able to be next to a J. Herbert King, who was the editor of the Sphinx, the national publication of Alpha Phi Alpha, and start to see the world from their perspective, invaluable.
I learned how to lead through Alpha, and particularly through Xi Lambda chapter. As the chapter president, first of all, as Brother Lane said, young people didn't just become presidents of the chapter. Well, quite frankly, you didn't become president of the chapter, as I understand the history, if you didn't come through Theta chapter. So to come from some other chapter, especially from Alpha South, to them voting for me, let alone allowing me to run for office, was an honor. But leadership development, one of my last chapter meetings as chapter president, I'm looking on the front row where our 50-plus year brothers typically sit, and there's Roland Burris, who was at that time a former senator, the first African-American to win statewide office in Illinois in 2 different offices. Next to him was Abraham Bolden, who was the first African-American to serve on the Secret Service detail of a president, and then went to jail after warning them that the president was going to be assassinated and telling them how ineffective the Secret Service detail was. They arrested him for the shooting, and he spent time in prison. And it wasn't until Obama gave him a Medal of Freedom, but it was Trump that actually pardoned him, right? And a number of other brothers sitting on this front row that I learned how to run a company. I learned how to debate, when not to debate, and all these leadership skills that I'm trying to pour into my son and other people and leaders that I'm helping to develop. I learned at Kennedy King, at the Excel Center. I learned in this chapter, in these meetings, is nothing I could have gotten from a classroom, and nothing that the history book really teaches you, other than we develop leaders as a part of our mission statement, and it's true, and we live it. We live that mission.
I want to talk about specifically the last thing that Joel said, developing leaders. And how did we impact that? Well, in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, Alpha Phi Alpha, and I see Brother Batista in the audience, decided that it was going to do a computer lab school at the Alpha House and began mentoring kids. Mentoring black boys is the rage today. It wasn't the rage in the early 80s. So we were in the front of that. And that means a lot in the sense that since then, I've been involved with chapter programs that are now quite creative with the things that we can do with mentoring. But it had to start somewhere. And so it started in the 80s at Mollison School, which was right across the street from the fraternity house at 4432 King Drive.
One of the things that comes to mind is early leadership. In the 1920s, Brother George Robert Arthur was working with the Rosenwald Foundation, Rosenwald Fund. And they came up, and this came about in the chapter. to because of Jim Crow was so prevalent in the country that many of the young doctors couldn't do the research and things that they wanted to do at many of the medical schools. So the Rosenwald Fund created a Rosenwald Fellow. And the fellow was to young doctors where they could go overseas with their families and study at the best universities, do research work in Europe. And that started right here in Xi Lambda chapter. And not only was it limited to the our brothers here, they made it available nationwide. That was the earliest form of leadership there, and very beneficial.
Thank you, brothers. Our next question builds off of that, and it's a question for all of you as well. How has Xi Lambda chapter been able to leverage its leadership or its membership or its position within the city of Chicago to promote change and awareness? And that can either be political change, legislative change, cultural, what have you. Let's start with Brother Holloway again.
Well, it boils down to people. It boils down to people, to brothers. When you think of a William Dawson and the political organization, you think of John Stroger and the county organization. It's, again, connections and things that you learn from these people as you deal with them.
So I'm not on social media. I made a list, right? And it's just so many names to go through. What's really interesting is as growing up in Chicago, I saw men leading that I found out were alphas, right? Including an uncle and a cousin that I didn't know were alphas because they didn't necessarily walk around with symbols, but they exemplified what alpha men are, and was happy to realize that they were alpha men, right? So you talk about the John Strogers, and I mentioned Roland Burris's and things of that nature, but several aldermen, county commissioners, shaping policy to this day that are in this chapter. So we're talking about Alpha Phi Alpha, but we're really talking about this chapter. So I'm a say Danny Davis, who is not a member of this chapter, but I work with Congressman Davis regularly, and somebody said, well, why don't you think he should retire? I was like, why? He's still doing the work, and I'm still working with him. So as long as he's doing the work, why would I send him home? But this chapter, right, there's so many men and their buildings named after alpha men who've come through this chapter for their accomplishments. I know some of them personally or have learned the history by sitting at the hem of these other men, and the Neil F. Simeons, the Strogers, the Dr. Beasley's, et cetera, as we start rattling off names and contributions to Chicago, and the like. We could be here forever just talking about impact. We continue to make impact. 100 years from now, I hope somebody's sitting here talking my name into existence about what I contributed to the city through the work that I do, and I would be happy for it.
I love it. I like to, just imagine Chicago. At one point, there was a brother who was mayor of Chicago at the same time while a brother was chairman of the finance committee for the county of Cook, while at the same time a brother was in office in one of the major state offices. So you could come to chapter meeting and you might see anybody at any political level of this entire state that could impact your life individually. That is some kind of positive feeling when you can walk in the room and the mayor of your town is in there, or you can walk in the room and, hey, even right now today, the Speaker of the House was initiated right at Xi Lambda. But I don't want to really talk about the Chicago impact. Let's talk a little about the Alpha impact. Xi Lambda is known right now for its size, but Xi Lambda is loaded with Chicagoans. And what are Chicagoans great at? Figuring out how we can maximize the vote. And so once upon a time, this chapter, there had to be rules made because this chapter was the chapter that made sure that if we were given 10 votes, we had a way to have 20. And so that's one of the things that made us great. We made the organization become more organized.
In terms of leadership, there's no question the political leadership in the city was greatly impacted by Alpha Brothers. But also in the area of journalism, you had Brother Claude Barnett, who had the Associated Negro Press. You had Brother John H. Johnson, perhaps the most famous media person of the 20th century among blacks. And this had a big influence because both were great supporters of the chapter. And then in the field of the military, we had Brigadier General Julian A. Dawson, who was William Dawson's brother. With the National Guard, we had Brother Earl Renfro, who was also a brigadier general, and Colonel Bertram Pratt, all with the Illinois 8th. So across the board, the leadership has been there, and we've been recognized for it.
That leadership is certainly impressive, but also to see these people in either a chapter meeting or at a Wednesday night poker table and see them put in their place.
Right.
Thank you, brothers. Again, all of these questions build upon one another. So, as Brother Holloway mentioned a little bit earlier, for a little bit of context for this next question, the general headquarters of the fraternity was located in Chicago at 4432 South Parkway Boulevard, which is now King Drive, and they shared that space with Theta and Xi Lambda chapter. So Brother Holloway, Brother Lawson, and Brother Ricks, as active members of the fraternity during that time, the general headquarters was here from 1954 until 1991. So could you all tell me, or tell us, how Xi Lambda chapter shaped the history of the general organization while it was in the city? Let's start with Brother Lawson.
Well, Xi Lambda was shaping the fraternity in a lot of ways prior to them even coming to 1954. Most of the fraternity business was done on the convention floor. And Xi Lambda was past masters at, Robert's Rules, Parliamentary Procedure. And they have been innovators. The idea of the go to high school, go to college came out of Chicago and other programs, so that they were kind of leading the way. Buying the house from the foundation in 1954 was very, very controversial. But in no way did it really, it kind of spurred the chapter on, because the foundation sold the house to the National. And there was, like I said, it was very, very, very difficult time in a lot of ways, because there had been a fundraising effort that led up to that. And so the brothers that started in 1948, prior to that, they were in the arcade building at 35th and State Street. And that's where the offices of the headquarters were. Benny D. Brown was the executive at that time. But it really didn't affect the chapter that much. They just kind of spurred them on to do bigger and better things. Yeah.
The chapter and the Alpha House, wow. That's probably the most loaded topic, Brother Bates Smith, that you possibly could talk about for Alphas who were around Chicago in the time toward the end of it. The end of it is because we moved, and us Chicagoans were surprised by the move initially. But as we learned, we're masters of politics and we recover fast. Chicago politics is where so many lessons of Alpha are given, and not just Chicago's Lambda, Chicago IDL, Chicago politics, period. We often teach Alpha the way that it's supposed to be done. Where this relates to the Alpha House is that Lambda, many thought would be crushed and hurt by Alpha Phi Alpha moving. Turns out we do pretty doggone good when we get to stand on our own. And we get to prove that over and over.
So I wasn't here, right? The very first Sphinx magazine that I got as a member of the fraternity was a groundbreaking ceremony, a picture of a groundbreaking ceremony where we were supposed to rebuild the house that was raised on King Drive. Subsequently, the headquarters moved to Baltimore, right? But the purpose of this is kind of talking about our impact on Chicago history. So the perspective that I wanted to share is what I learned, again, sitting around the table, is that the house on King Drive was an anchor to the African-American community in Bronzeville during its time, right? And so it may have been Dickie or one of the other brothers talked about a Kappa man coming to town, didn't have any place to stay, in transition, and we put him up at the Alpha House. It wasn't just about being an Alpha, it was about community. The Parkway Ballroom was across the street, and the after parties would be at the Alpha House. And so the opportunity to entertain was not lost on a place of business and brotherhood and camaraderie. And so it was given back to community in the same way that we were a part of community. I'm happy to say I was part of that generation. When I came home to Chicago from college, we were nomadic. We were meeting at Kennedy King College until literally everybody else was gone from Kennedy King, and we were still there. It was the roof was leaking. They were like, "Why are you guys still here? This building is closed." We were still meeting at Kennedy King, but I was a part of the generation of the chapter who I wasn't as emotionally attached to it because it wasn't there for me, but I helped us figure out where else to go. So now, if you haven't been to 8233 Southwestern, 36 Southwestern, the Excel Center, you know, the chapter purchased, we got it designated as a community center, got the 501c3, and we operate programming. It's not King Drive, but it's home for now.
Brother Holloway.
My brothers have said it for me. You know, again, thinking of 4432 South Parkway, originally, it had been a governor's mansion. It was purchased by the chapters here in Chicago, Theta and Xi Lambda. And as Dickie said, in '54, that foundation sold it to the national organization. We got along well. First floor, second and third floor, and we won't mention the basement. But when the decision was made to tear down the house, to have a groundbreaking, to build another structure on that location, it was a shrewd political move made by powers in the South and in the East, and a very effective political move for them, because once they got that building down, they never went beyond putting a shovel in the ground and taking pictures, and that meant national organization and a lot of the other powers moved to another location. But as Joel has said, and Arndell, we learned our lesson. It woke us up, and we've been going upward, onward and upward ever since.
as Brother Holloway just noted in that history, the time immediately preceding the move was a very interesting time for Lambda chapter. So, Brother Ricks and Brother Johnson, as presidents of Lambda chapter in that time, how was Lambda chapter continuing to build its legacy in the 90s and in the early 2000s? Brother Ricks.
In immediately after the move of the fraternity did some really interesting things. They decided that they were going to tax for buildings all life members of the organization. Our fraternity history says that if you pay life membership, your dues are paid for life. Well, in their wisdom to raise money for this national building headquarters, they decided that they were going to tax those life members. Bunch of educated folk ain't real good at telling them they're paid in full, but you got to give me some more money. So we had a little period where half of our chapter was deemed inactive because they said that we ain't paying y'all no money to move from Chicago. You lost your mind. Well, as a result of that, there was the period where our membership goes down because when they decided that you would be inactive, you would be. Well, one of the things that happened was we decided to build the membership back up. And the chapter decided to pay that fee for some of the brothers. The fee was nominal, but the brothers refused to pay it because it was the principal. And the fee was $10. No, we ain't giving you $10. Okay. Now imagine, you all know what fees are today. Imagine paying $10 for something. Right? That's throwaway money. But no, they would not give the $10. So we commenced the program to pay all of the brothers, and since then, and ever since then, Lambda has become one of the 2 or 3 largest chapters in the fraternity. And in addition to becoming one of the 2 or 3 largest chapters, has housed a couple of regional vice presidents, the general president of Alpha, and continues to try to move things forward in directions that, and to do things that nobody's seen before. Just that we're here tonight at a library honoring our centennial is symbolic to us for many reasons. The meeting where we decided to have 8236 South King Drive was done in this same thing. So all of our things come full circle. Lambda was great and powerful, and they decided to take away the house to think that they would take the great and powerful away. But guess what? It came back.
So like I said, I returned from Florida. Everybody was in their feelings about this house. It's like, I get it, but we got to move forward. But the chapter did move forward. And Brother Ricks became president right as I was transitioning home. And he instituted things that built brotherhood, right? We started having a repast at chapter meetings that was furnished by the brothers whose birthdays it was that month, right? So a couple of months, there's only 2 or 3 brothers that had birthdays, so they got the short end of the stick. But there's a lot of April babies, so I was good. But we didn't stop service. So we continued to double down on serving the community. And I think that is what is important because, again, I want to tie this back to how the chapter has impacted Chicago. We continue to build relationships with other service organizations and expand our footprint in the service community. And I think we've continued to do that and build on that since that time, allowing us to think outside the box on some things. So we didn't have a house to host mentors. So under Keith Garrett's leadership, we went to the Off the Streets Club on the West Side, and we're mentoring kids in that capacity. We didn't have a relationship. One of our national programs was Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We didn't have a formal relationship, so I recruited some bigs. And we went from 0 to like 30 bigs to where the national president, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, shouted us out at our general convention about that growth activity. So we figured out ways despite not having a house or a formal home. And then all of you saw this the stuff that was on display. So there's this big mirrored A5A. When I became vice president, they said, well, it's the vice president's job to keep this. So I'm carrying this around to my home at the time. My wife family building, and it's in the basement, and we're moving the stuff around. As vice president, I'm hosting the vice president has to chair the executive committee meeting. So I'm in my parents' basement because that's where I was living at the time, and so it impacted my family too. So, but we continue to try and serve and figure out ways to serve, and we didn't use not having the house as an excuse to not serve until we got a house that we use it for more service.
Brother Riggs, could you say a few words about the service during your presidency?
I'm proud to say that that wonderful Off the Street club that Joe mentioned started in my administration. But the service of the chapter over time is incredible. Start to something that became one of the most dynamic things that the chapter has done. And that was when it started an educational foundation. And it started an educational foundation with the purpose to give scholarships. And now there are hundreds of black boys that have received scholarships because of an educational foundation that started in 1995. That educational foundation to this day now has doubled the amount of money it gives, and now there's all kinds of organizations that want to figure a way to attach to it and be involved with it. It becomes that the programming that we do is what attracts attention if the programming, the spirit of it is correct and it's for the good of others. When we stay attached to things that are in the mission of our organization, it gets proven over and over that we're helping our community wants us around. And I don't know if that explains what you asked after.
It does. Thank you. So our last question tonight will address our chapter's bright future. And then after that, we'll open the floor to questions. So what do you brothers see as future opportunities or challenges for the next 100 years of Xi Lambda chapter? Let's start with Brother Lawson.
I think that the greatest challenge will be to, and not challenge, just work with what we have here right now. We have all the potential in the world. Xi Lambda has always shown its resilience. It's every time it's hit with any sort of challenge of any kind, it's met that challenge. And I think that the future is very, very bright for the chapter. You have some outstanding brothers in the chapter. Keep everybody involved with all the opportunities we have. I think we will continue to move forward. We will be here another 100 years from now. That I'm confident of.
Well, my thoughts about the future of Xi Lambda, I'm going to say that it's so bright. And so bright because I believe that our chapter does a really great job of following a blueprint or a mission that Alpha Phi Alpha gives us. And the first tenet of that mission is develop leaders. For those of you that are not members of Alpha Phi Alpha, come to Xi Lambda and want something. You got to figure out how to get it. So if you don't figure out how to get it, I can promise you won't. Okay? And so I would like to say that our chapter is a master at developing leaders. I watched programming that two people that I would call very young put together for an event like this. And we watched those leaders develop, and those of us that are a little older than them, we stick our chest out because it means that Alpha's effective, and Alpha will be effective for a long time.
Building on the developing leaders response, we've got to continue to develop and engage that leadership. Like many membership organizations, people come and sometimes they lose touch. They stop coming around. We have to keep people engaged I have continuously been a member of Xi Lambda chapter since I returned from graduate school. When I didn't know that I couldn't afford the dues, I paid the dues. I can afford the dues, I pay the dues. My wife has been a consistent member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. This is what we do. The opportunity is for collaboration and partnership. So this is about Xi Lambda chapter today, but we stand in solidarity and support with the other fraternities, the other civic organizations, and our ability to get stuff done for Chicago, for communities where we come from, where we live, rests solely on our ability to partnership. Now, we're probably going to lead that partnership, but we need to partner with each other to get stuff done, and we will do that. We'll continue to do that.
Adrian, I'm thinking. I remember that one of the questions that did not make the cut to be discussed from the stage tonight was, what do you see as the golden age of Xi Lambda chapter? That very special period. I see the golden age as February of 2024 and the next 5 to 7 years. And why? Because of the legacy, because of the history. But my friends, realize history is a tool. Sometimes history often challenges you, inspires you, sort of sets the bar. But history is simply a tool that helps you to recognize and understand reality. And that's something now with artificial intelligence and misinformation, you gotta know what's really happening. Recognize and understand reality. That's what history helps you do. The choices that you make over these next few years, the priorities that you set, the paths that you follow will determine what Xi Lambda's next 100 years will be like. And I see them as golden.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. December of 1931, December 6th, there was an article in the Chicago Defender, and it read, "Local frat deserted by its members." And the, the effect of that, the article was concerning the Great Depression that set in. The market had crashed in 29, but both chapters lost all of Theta and Xi Lambda lost all of their money to being a bank. They had to suspend the Constitution to hold a chapter meeting because they didn't have enough financial brothers to hold a quorum. The oppressor in this case was not only the economy, but also the national organization has set, they called it Law 17, which in fact said there was a fine from anywhere from $7 to $20 per brother on top of the dues for Xi Lambda then were $24 a year. So if you hadn't paid that 24, you had another 20 to it. Brothers couldn't afford it. Theta had petitioned the education director, who at that time was Ray Cannon, who went on to become general president. But they went to him because they said, hey, we're in school, we can't afford these fines and so forth. Xi Lambda signed on with them, the petition. But in turn, they rallied everybody else in the country to fight off this Rule 17, Law 17 as they call it. So Xi Lambda knew how to survive then. That was one of their greatest challenges. And I just wanted to mention how they overcame things there. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, brothers. This is exactly why I chose you four to be on the panel. because we always get tidbits like this. It's always something different
Right.
every time. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. So at this time, we'll take about 10 minutes to answer any questions that the audience may have. And if you do have a question, please raise your hand and then stand once you're recognized. Brother Rodney Jones will bring you the microphone, and please start by letting us know to whom your question is addressed.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Brother Lawson, I'd like to ask, and Brother Holloway, and the types of things that were going on in the community in the 60s that attracted you to join Alpha Phi Alpha at that time.
Well, we used to have old saying, wine, women, and neck bones. That's what we were living on. No, there was a lot going on in the community. You had the civil rights movement, which was very, very big then. And in Chicago, I was kind of legacy. I had two uncles that were in the frat. So I knew about Alpha Phi, but I knew about the other fraternities as well, somewhat. But the work of Alpha was really being done then. You have to understand, Xi Lambda was a far different chapter than it is today. And their leadership was leadership. They looked to Theta to do the changing sheets and going around doing the canned goods and so forth. They just didn't do that. But they were there for the lawyers in the civil rights movement. Dr. King's lawyer was Arch Carey, Brother Archibald Carey. That was his personal attorney. In fact, in 1960, when Theta had their 50th anniversary, he came here and spoke that Sunday for that weekend as a guest to Dr. Carey. So that was their leadership. But it was very involved, and it was very open, very noticeable. Yeah.
It was the girls. Again, I came into Alpha Phi Alpha at age 18. I was in school on DePaul's downtown campus, and even including the law school, which was heavily the School of Music, the College of Commerce, we didn't have as many black students as there are in this room now. And from my first smoker, it was definitely the sororities that caused me to pledge.
Yeah, the brothers would they'd have them upstairs, and they would come in. The brothers were sharp. They had double-breasted blazers on, and then AKs would flow down. This is
Fun Alpha, Xi Lambda fun fact, he mentioned Archibald Carey. Archibald Carey wrote and delivered part of the I Have a Dream speech years before Dr. King delivered it.
Yeah.
And Google it, it's a part of history, but he is actually the author of much of that speech that Dr. King is so famously known for. Xi Lambda history.
It's in 1952 he wrote that speech. He delivered it here at the convention, a Republican convention here in Chicago.
Good evening, brothers, and first and foremost, thank you for being the people that, again, have done and made tremendous strides within the organization in your respective chapters. My question is to Brother Johnson, actually the same question, so I don't mean to copy, but it was literally the same question. With all the fraternities, why Alpha? But to expand on that, how do you see the legacy of Alpha Phi Alpha being propagated throughout the community in today's generation to keep that interest growing and going for the brothers that are growing up with what they're growing up with now?
So as a son of the South Side of Chicago, I traveled to Tallahassee, Florida, to Florida A&M University, and probably like a lot of men in this room, I pledged my campus, right? So I got there and I saw who the leaders were. Turns out they were leaders everywhere, but when I got to campus, it was the alpha men who, many of whom I had gone to high school with here in Chicago. They were the ones who impressed upon us. You need a ride to the store, I can help, get you a ride. And not the ones from Chicago, but their line brothers from, Pensacola, Florida, or it was the expression of brotherhood and support for a non-brother, right? And so then I turned around and paid attention. They were the leaders, the Supreme Court justice, the student body president, the president of the NAACP. Oh, and by the way, it was 150 Alpha Sweethearts online. And so why wouldn't I? And so, half of my line was from Chicago, so it was the exposure to a group of leaders, student leaders at that time, who impressed upon me the opportunity to be a student leader and to be like them. And like I said earlier, then as I start talking to my parents about it, my father, your uncle Sonny is an alpha. Milton Johnson I'll let Dickie tell the Milton Johnson stories. And he was district director of Illinois at the time. I didn't know he was an alpha. He was just Uncle Sonny. Or Dr. Early Nichols, who's my cousin, who was an educator. I didn't know he was an alpha. He was just cousin Early, but he was a good man. He was Early and his wife, who was my blood cousin, were the example of strong marriage and family in my family structure, right? So as I observed those young men in front of me and then looked back over my shoulder at the strong men in my past, they were alpha men. What's the follow-up question? I forgot. Maintaining alpha relevance. Yeah, so again, we got to live the mission, right? We develop leaders, brotherhood, service, and advocacy. So I work in human services. I lead an organization that impacts community at the very root of some of the challenging issues that we're dealing with today across this city and country. We have to remain. So first of all, we can't take ourselves too serious, right? I mean, we have to realize that the work is in the streets, and so we write checks for stuff, but then we get down and we roll our sleeves up for other stuff, and we got to be willing to do that. We have to lead by example. I've been telling my sons at 17 and 20, I've been telling them their whole lives, Black history is alpha history. It is. But I also had to show them how alpha men show up and deliver on things that matter in our community. I do that through my daily life, but I do that by pointing out some things to them along the way. And so hopefully they're watching, they're listening. I have a son down at Florida A&M right now. He's critiqued me and critiqued my chapter on a few things, and I said, "You're not a member. You can't do that." One day, maybe that's his choice. But we have to remember why we're here. Why the Seven Jewels and those other men who were around at Cornell at that time thought it was important for us to form this bond. It's still relevant, taking care of ourselves and helping us advance as a people, to summarize it, right? And so that's why we're still relevant, because we continue to do the work.
Good evening. I was going to be good and just enjoy, and I'm so happy I was invited by Dr. Green. First, I want to say thank you for the years of leadership and mentoring in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And at the risk of being sort of opportunistic, this question or comment is posed to all of you. I was listening as a teacher. I'm a teacher here in Chicago. I teach juniors at South Shore International College Prep. And I was going to say quiet, but I had to when he said what's going to happen in continuing your legacy in the upcoming generations. So I have to share with you, the men in this room, that I overheard a conversation, 3 young men in my junior class, and they were trying to decide. They said, well, what is a fraternity? And what do they do? Which one do we join? They said, Miss Manette, do you know anything about that? I said, I do. But I've always been an advocate for classroom to community. And I will tell you, there is opportunity before they go to college for you to plant that seed, particularly in the young men, because now more than ever, they need your validation. Now more than ever, especially the ones that now it's not as cool to be smart, so they need to see smart men. And they need to see you as early as they can. And so there's opportunity with me. My desire, I am a physics teacher, and my desire is to create that bridge between this organization and young men in the classroom. And it is so rich. Field trips, there are things that's open for you to do, but the interest is there now in their junior year. And there are so many that are bright. Young black males are the most underrepresented for giftedness. So the community and society is more inclined to see them as overactive, or they are misunderstood. And it breaks my heart as a teacher to see that. Your validation is needed with that. And so I would like to know your comment on just a suggestion of how to keep the legacy going. Thank you.
I'm going to try to attack that. That was wonderful what you just stated about the need. One of Alpha Phi Alpha's national programs is called Go to High School, Go to College. So our intent is to find those young men who need our help in grammar school. We're not going to wait for them to be a junior in high school. We're going to find them earlier. Now, we're big and we're proud of it, but we also are realistic in what we can do. So invite, ask for our help, and we tend to go places we're invited to help. So if you need help as a physics teacher, I'm an engineer, so I understand what physics is. So we're more than willing to help where we're invited to help, and that's how we often find out what we can do is somebody has to tell us where there's a need. And we didn't know specifically about your need, but we do now. All right.
One of the things that I've seen that's different over the last 5 or 10 years in terms of our focus and our efforts, it's easy to get kids that are in high school and are doing well and give them scholarships. It's easy to help someone and mentor someone who's in college. But I've seen this chapter moving more and more towards young men in grammar school. Because let's face it, our society is losing black boys when they're in about maybe even before 3rd or 4th grade. Something I probably should not be talking about because I'm not on the committee. I've never helped them. I've not even gone to a session. One of our committees started last fall a boxing program. And although I've never been to any of it, I've watched the committee notes and agenda very, very closely. Number one, they're working with boys that are 10 to 18 or 10 to 16. 10 to 16, which is not, much younger age. When I read their notes, it's not that they're putting these gloves on these kids and putting them in a space and teaching them how to. They're doing things with the boys involving control, discipline. How does a man control his body? How does a man discipline and control his life, his mind? And I'm seeing within Xi Lambda and within the larger general organization of Alpha, more and more programs that are reaching younger children, because that's what's going to make a difference when you get to be my age, is the kids that are now in elementary school.
Thank you. Years ago, at 4432, there would be parties. And for those who were there was a back door on the top of the stage. And in the summertime, that door would often be open. One particular night, someone forgot to close the door. 4432 back in that day was considered the low end. Someone came in the house. Some of you may remember the trophy case got broke. Some trophies were taken out. The word went out, trophies got brought back in. Community brought the trophies back into the Alpha House. They brought it back because of the work that the fraternity did in the community at that time. Little slight correction, we were educating and tutoring young boys in the 70s at 4432 before Brother Baptiste got initiated. Right now, we're doing some things that need to be discussed. We used to have an African Rites of Passage program, but we have some other programs that are on that I think these people need to know about, other than just the boxing. Boxing is just one of them, but they need to know that we are doing things for the kids in our community so that they in turn can bring their kids to our other programs, Brother Riggs, and we can assist them in that.
That's for me, Brother Conley? Was there a question in there?
No.
Okay, so we'll have one more question.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, well, he called my name.
Wait, we got it. Go ahead, close it.
So he asked about programs. So there's programs now in boxing and chess and all kinds of things, and the programs are not centered on anything. They're an activity, but the purpose of the activity is to center on the mentoring. The mentoring is what's important for our youth, and that's where the center of it is. In answer to your question, Brother Conley. Well, cooking, I can't list all of them. There's many programs.
So, unfortunately, we have a timetable. We don't have time for more questions. But if you do have a question for one particular brother, we may have a few minutes. We do have to wrap up at 7:30. So if we have time between now and 7:30, please find that brother and ask him the question that you have. So I want to thank the audience for their participation and these questions and these talk back, as brothers are known to do. I hope that the memories that these brothers recalled tonight were both as edifying as they were entertaining. As I said, every time I talk to these brothers, I learn something new. So I hope that the younger brothers or the newer brothers in this room also heard a story or heard a bit of information that they never heard before. I hope that the public was able to learn some of the unsung history and the impact of Chicago Alphas. And I think most importantly to me, most dear to my heart right now, is that I hope that some of the senior brothers in this room, I want to thank you all for being here, but I also hope that you have been reminded of these memories, both that were discussed and that were presented on the boards in the exhibit. I hope that you were reminded of those bygone days and the days that were imbued with fond memories. So finally, I would like to invite our Centennial Chairman, Brother Roy Strahan, to say a few words.
Thank you. So I'm even more proud to be a member of Xi Lambda tonight. After hearing these brothers speak, I'm inspired. I'm excited about our Centennial. This is just the beginning. We have a number of events coming up that we want to invite you to. But first of all, I wanted to thank the panelists for being here and being included tonight. You guys were amazing. And also, we speak a lot about the history of Alpha, and we're talking about the past. But I want everyone to leave here tonight realizing that we're actually living history. These brothers up here tonight, as Joe mentioned, 100 years from now, we hope that people are saying our names on these stages. But we have brothers who are making an impact, brothers who are developing, brothers who are world changers in this room right now. So we're always making history. So even when we talk about developing leaders and making sure that our younger brothers are coming up, we have one in this room, Brother Adrian Bates Smith, who put together the curation of the exhibit and also the panel.
Go ahead, man. That's him. That's him. That's him. That's him. That's him. He's the one.
So when I asked Adrian, he was like, I don't know if I want to. I'm like, I know you good. You got it. So I appreciate Adrian for coming through and putting together the exhibit as well as doing a beautiful job with the session tonight. So I appreciate that, brother. So we have a couple of events coming up that I want to invite you all personally to. So first of all, on June 1st, we have Alpha Health event that will be at the Excel Center. So thanks to the good folks at Blue Cross Blue Shield, we'll have vaccinations there. We'll have blood drive. We'll have also a brother Curtis Bowden, as well as brother Umo, who's in the audience tonight. They are part of this committee where we're doing a Centennial bike ride. So pray for us. I won't be participating in it, but pray for us with that. So Centennial Bike Ride is also going to be paired with our Alpha Walk, which we do every year. So we're really excited about that. Also on June 15th, everybody say June 15th. All right, we're going to turn it into church here tonight. So June 15th is our Centennial Gala, which will be at the Marriott Marquis. So I want everybody here to be included on that. That night, our brother Scavella and his trio will be there for the VIP reception. We also have Soul of Chicago will be the house band for that night, which actually the leader of Soul of Chicago is actually Mary J. Blige's band director. So we're excited about that. We also have for our main entertainment, 5-time Grammy Award-winning artist Layla Hathaway. So this event will be just as special for her as it is for us because it's Father's Day weekend. So she gets to celebrate Father's Day weekend with her father, Donnie Hathaway's fraternity. So we're really excited about that event. Want everybody here to be a part of that. I want to wrap up. Everybody had a good time tonight? All right. So I had a few things for the ladies who helped us with this event tonight. Our videographers, they've been amazing. We have some flowers for you guys. And we also have Raquel. I don't see Raquel, but she's over the Vivian Harsh. She's in the back. There you go. She's over the Vivian Harsh collection, and she's been amazing with making sure that this event also went off without a hitch. So here you go. So that's the end of our program. Really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Can we give the panelists another round of applause? All right. Hope to see you all at the next event on June 1st. So thank everybody for coming tonight.